Hi, I am Atti, and I am here with more books today. To be honest, I am not super feeling it. All cluttered. Not super feeling in the mood to make a video today. Not super feeling the books that I got. I mean, they're not bad. It's just that I wasn't enthusiastic about pretty much any of them. I was enthusiastic about one of them, but not crazy enthusiastic. So I'm gonna try and do this one, I guess, a little bit faster because I honestly just need to do this so I can go to the library today, get the rest or my next batch. I've got these books in the opposite order they're supposed to be. Hold on. Whoa. Okay. That was hard to flip over. All right, starting from, this is my library picture book haul, starting from my least favorite going up to my most favorite. Okay, so my least favorite today was Grandma's Wedding Album by Harriet Seifert, paintings by Carla Gudian? Not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but there you go. This book, technically I guess it's a story, but the story is just like a Wikipedia-worthy basic, recap of what a wedding is in, just completely straight United States tradition. Has a little bit of a framing device where these kids are asking the grandma about her wedding, and then she shows them the wedding. And it's just like they meet at a picnic, they knew they were meant to be, they propose, they meet the parents, and then they invite people, and then they have a wedding. So it's really just here's what a wedding is, and really there's no flavor to it. It's just a description of what a wedding is, and the only the closest it gets to flavor is a little bit of just saying how good it is to get married, and someday when you're grown-ups, you'll have your own weddings, and I hope I'll be there to celebrate and dance. And I just don't particularly super approve of the message. I love weddings, but I also understand the complicated nature of the reality and the historical reality of weddings, and so the fact that this book is just it's just wedding propaganda and extremely boring. Reads like a not even Wikipedia. Wikipedia would be more interesting than this. This is more like an Encyclopedia Britannica, just excerpt kind of description of a wedding. They do have this rather impressively lengthy section briefly describing wedding traditions across the world, and that was kind of interesting. But again, just look up weddings on Wikipedia. Don't read this book. The next book is Little Pearl by Martin Widmark and Amelia Zubiak. I'm saying that wrong. What is that? Jubak? I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that name. It's a Polish name. The artist is from Poland. So my best guess is Jubak. Or Jubak. I don't know. Anyways, this book has some pretty moments of art. It's just this is a very personal take, so it's not gonna mean much to anybody else, but this book comes across to me as it's like if a Disney movie were written by me when I was 10. The voice is just a lot of the characters are meant to be kind of quirky in a sort of Alice in Wonderlandy sort of way, but it just comes across as sort of forced and the idea of quirkiness rather than anything genuine or written from life at all. A tall beetle bowed, lifting his top hat. "I'm not sure we are big. Perhaps you are as small as a shrug." "As a shrug? Do you mean as small as a bug?" I replied. And then every time a bug talks, they say a word that rhymes instead of the real world, and then every time that happens, the girl in the main character girl corrects them, and it's too personal to say, to really mean anything. But yeah, it's just it sounds like 9-year-old writing of a Disney movie plot, complete with Tamatoa here, and that's why it's Disney-esque to me. It's Disney-esque in the kind of most boring way it could be, where it's just there's just a villain added into the story without any particular oomph to it. It really just feels for the sake of having a villain, gotta have a bad guy. They fight the crab, and it's the bad crab. Listen to this dialogue too. This is a good example of this. A huge crab was watching me. "Who are you?" I asked, staring up. "I'm the crab, small one." That just sounds like something that I would have written when I was in grade school for some reason to me. Anyways, it is written by a Swedish author, so maybe it's just English as a second language, like stiffness that I'm sensing. Not to say that you necessarily are stiff if you have English as a second language. It's just like I'm trying to think of a reason that it's written so awkwardly, and I don't know. I just didn't like it. Okay, Harriet. Oh wait, this is Harriet Seifert again. She did the Grandma's Wedding thing, didn't she? Illustrations by Bridget Berger. Where Does Kitty Go in the Rain? This is just an educational book. It really reads like something that would be read to like a toddler by a grown-up as like an educational tool. It doesn't sound like something that you would like sit down as a kid and read yourself, or certainly as an adult either. To me, there's really no story. It's just looking at different animals in the rain and seeing how they react to it. Do birds like rain? Some do, some don't. Most small birds tuck themselves away in nests. It's very like informative, so there's not really any flavor or voice in this outside of the art, which is, cute, but like not super moving to me. Not something I don't know, it just doesn't do that much for me. And there's a little bit of rhyming, but not much. There's like occasional Kitty will find a place that's dry. Let's look for Kitty. Want to try? And there's kind of, I guess, kind of like a can you find Kitty in the book thing. But like most of the book is not rhyming. It's like very, serious sounding informational text. But I guess whenever the little girl talks, it's in rhyme for some reason. So I don't know. I just felt like nonplussed by it. There's some like more like educational like questions to ask, compare, contrast, how to do research, observe, write, tell, or draw. So it's definitely like an education tool type book, which is why I wanted to also point out that there is this scene, which I'm not speaking as a earthworm expert or from experience here, but there's this part where it says, "Do worms like rain?" Yes, earthworms mostly live and travel underground because they need moisture all the time. After it rains, you will see worms because it is wet enough for them, and they can wriggle along much faster above ground. I read this other worm book that I reviewed a little bit ago that said that that's not why. It's actually that they come out of their holes in the rain because they're holes filled with water and they would drown if they didn't come out. So I don't know whether to believe this book or that book, but that book seemed much more well-informed. Maybe both of them are true. Maybe they're both reasons that worms come out in the rain. Either way, it made me kind of like doubt the educational, strength of this book that had nothing else really going for it. So, yeah, I guess as a way to teach weather, I don't know. Footprints in the Clouds by Jiwei Jing. I'm not exactly sure how that is pronounced, but I'm doing my best. Footprints in the Clouds. This book is fine. The art is definitely unique. Not particularly my thing, but I think it's good because it's like interesting. The story is very linear and a little bit like I don't know. There's nothing to draw me in. It's just about a boy who goes all over this magical world and he can always find his way home because he's wearing red socks. And it just kind of states that over and over again. He's just telling all the different places that he likes to go, and then he comes back using his red socks, and then he goes here, and then he comes back, and then he comes here. And, one day he doesn't have his socks, and that's how he learns that he actually has everything he needs to find his way home on his own by walking in the clouds. It's very surreal, and I would expect a surreal magical book to be more interesting to me, but it just it's like so stripped down and doesn't feel super uniquely voiced, and it's just extremely linear, and it kind of had me wondering, like, is this going somewhere the whole time? And it never really felt like it went somewhere. I mean, technically it did, but it just didn't. I feel like it never let me land and be somewhere. It was just kind of like skipping over what could have been a world, but there wasn't any like moment of like grounding or scene setting or lingering on anything, and it just kind of felt like I was being rushed through a story that was too surreal for me to understand. I needed to sit with it longer, if that makes any sense. When the Cousins Came by Katie Yamasaki. This book was a little bit boring to me, but other than that, I thought it was pretty cool. I think that this could be a pretty good book to have in a classroom. I've got these like weird little fuzzies all over my bed. Oh, it's tape? I don't understand. I feel like it would be a good book to have in a classroom or something because it's it's got some representation that I don't often see. I always kind of feel bad saying that a book should be in a classroom just because of that. Not because it shouldn't, but because I wish that there were so many books offering alternative representations of families and the like, that you could pick books that would have that, but based on some other metric. Like, oh yeah, of course we have a book about this book is about a mixed Asian African American, like Asian American, African American, and I think also white family. And like, I wish you could be like, yeah, we have a book like that in our classroom, for those kids who have that type of family to see themselves in, but we chose it because it's like because of this, and not just because of that. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, there's just not that many options, especially when it comes to something as unique as this particular family setup. So I guess I would recommend it almost on that basis alone. And it's not like a bad book, so it's it's good enough. It's this kid's cousins come to visit, and they just hang out and do various things. The things they do are sort of generic-ish, I guess. Not really. The girl paints, and then they do some like chalk graffiti. So the chalk graffiti is kind of a cool moment that was a surprise to me, because I feel like you don't see a lot of graffiti representation in kids' books. They like practice using chopsticks. These two kids already, like the cousins already know how, but the main character doesn't. They're like riding bikes and skateboarding and building pillow forts and pretty standard stuff. All of these things reminded me of my childhood, so it just kind of all seemed like basic kid stuff to me. And so I didn't really get a super strong sense of like who these kids were or what their personalities were like, except that I guess that the main character is kind of like a lonely kid because her baby brother is so newborn and she doesn't have siblings, so she feels kind of like left out, and these two are like really closely bonded, so I guess that's something. I don't know, I'm trying to find reasons to like this book more, because to be honest, the end result of it for me is that it just wasn't super entertaining. Didn't make me chuckle, didn't make me tear up or feel mysterious, or it just didn't like particularly catch me in any particular way. Okay, this one's called A Bug in a Vacuum by Melanie Watt. The E in Melanie has an accent over it. I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce it differently because of that. Not sure. This is a surprising book. First of all, when I got it, I was like, oh no, did I accidentally get like too thick of a book? Because it's so heavy and thick, but it's actually a really short story with just a lot of pages. The art is fine. It's like very computer graphicsy, very like weird computery textures, and I don't know if you can really see from this, but it's like everything's got this like weird texture overlaid over it, and like they took a flat couch texture and then like cut out a shape from it or something, which is an artifact that I don't hate, but in this particular case, I don't know, didn't do too much for me. There's a very like vintage Americana kind of vibe to everything here. There's the frozen dinner, and look at I like the detail of all the trash and gross stuff underneath the fridge, and like the Cheerios on the floor. You can tell this is a house that was like lived in by kids, so I like that kind of detail. There's like a bow and Q-tips next to the fuzzy lidded toilet. So I don't know, it just felt very Midwestern to me based on my experience in the Midwest. So it's about this bug who gets trapped in a vacuum, and a dog whose toy also gets trapped in a vacuum, but that's very, very secondary. It's sort of like a subplot, and doesn't have dialogue. All the dialogue is the fly going through the 5 stages of grief. It's 5, right? 5 stages of grief. And each stage of grief is represented by like a kitschy retro product, like the frozen dinner for anger, stuff like that. So it's really just like demonstrating the idea of the 5 stages of grief by the the fly's dialogue as he experiences that stage. And so it's nice. It demonstrates it instead of just explaining it. It just demonstrates it. Well, it does kind of explain it. It gives a little brief. Does it? No, actually it doesn't. So it kind of explains what it is just based on the copy on the packaging, but it really doesn't that much. It kind of gives you a vague idea. So it's actually that I think is commendable, that it's like it's very much just like the fly saying phrases that fit with that stage of grief, and so it doesn't explain the concepts outright. It demonstrates them too. So cool, but I didn't. I don't know. Didn't particularly do that much to me. There's not much of a story. It's again more of an information conveying book. So yeah. This one's called Small Beauties: The Journey of Darcy Hart O'Hara by, wow, this is all cursive. Elvira, is your name Elvira? I can't tell. I have to go to the back of the book to read that. Yeah, Elvira Woodruff and Adam Rex. This is it's one of those kind of realism style art styles, and a very, historical, it's like historical fiction. It's about a family in Ireland who are doing all right but live very poor, and then when the famine strikes their house, they are evicted by means of their house being burnt down by the government that is evicting them. They're like, hey, we're going to evict you, and then they come back and they're like, time to evict, and then torch the house and then send them to America, but their family gets broken up and some of them have to stay in Ireland because they're too old. So it's like a very sad story, but it's kind of like the main character girl, she is always noticing small details around her, and that kind of gets her in trouble in the beginning of the story, but then it means that she actually brings all these little keepsakes to remember Ireland by for her family once they're in America, and there's like a final scene where they kind of do that. They say that the main reason this is like the start of my neutrals is that I didn't love the art style. I wasn't super engaged in the writing, but I was a bit engaged in the history because I actually learned some things about the Irish famine and details about Irish immigration to America that I didn't know before. So that's cool. Is like detailed enough. Like goes into the kind of some specific details. It doesn't gloss over the historical accuracies of that, and taught me some things. So that's cool. As far as informational books go and educational books go, this is the way to do it. And interestingly enough, the author's note says that this book is inspired by the story of Henry Ford, who apparently was the child of Irish immigrants, or the great-grandchild or the grandchild of Irish immigrants. Not super sure. Anyways, it doesn't really go into life after they're in America. It's mostly about Ireland, and so I don't know. I found that vaguely intriguing. William's Doll by Charlotte Zolotow. Pictures by William Penedubois. Interesting cover. Look at all of these like pennants around there that almost look like people watching him. This is a very straightforward story. I actually think I may have seen it before. It's a story that it really has that vibe of like somebody like, I just am convinced that the person who wrote this was like a school teacher, and she noticed this problem that she was having among families and parents and children, and was like, I should write a book to speak to that problem. And then she did, and she kind of did the bare minimum that she needed to do that, but it's effective. So it's a story about a little boy who wants a baby doll to play with, but his dad and the other boys in his life all say that he's a sissy if he wants that, and so they like just give him trains and basketballs instead. And he likes those things, but he still wants a doll. And then he sees his grandmother, and his grandmother gets him a doll, and the dad's upset, and so she explains he needs it, she said, to hug and to cradle and to take to the park, so that when he's a father like you, he'll know how to take care of his baby and feed him and love him and bring him the things he wants, like a doll, so that he can practice being a father. So it's just speaking to, it's just a simple kind of one-note anti-toxic masculinity book that reads as though it were a teaching tool, something to hand to a dad, something for a teacher to hand to a dad when their son is going through this themselves or something. That's what this feels like to me. So I don't know, it's all right. I feel like if you need something to like instill the idea that it's okay for boys to like dolls from an early age, you could do better than that. But if you're solving the problem of a boy already having that idea instilled in him, then that's fine. Okay, Hecate Peg. Hecate Peg is definitely a book that I read when I was a kid, and it's made by at least some of the folks who made Rain Babies, which is a book I loved when I was a kid. But I didn't remember that I had read this until I opened the first page, and then all the memories came back. It's Hecate Peg by Audrey Wood, illustrated by Dawn Wood. and it's a classic old book with a very lush painterly style. I it's like realism, but the lighting is so wacko that it almost doesn't feel like realism. It's like fantasy realism, I guess. It's really just a fairy tale. It reads like a Brothers Grimm style fairy tale where some pretty gruesome stuff happens, or at least almost happens. These kids, these kids all say what they want from the market, and they're weird kids who want butter, china pitcher, a pot of honey, a tin of salt, crackers, and a tub of butter. That makes sense. And then a bowl of egg pudding makes some sense. I love this character. He's the best part of this. Look at that absolute unit. That kid needs his egg pudding. There's so much sass and attitude in that little funky man. Love it. So yeah, and then she leaves the house and tells them not to let anybody decide not to play with the fire. So this witch, of course, offers them gold in order to let her in and play with the fire. So they let her in and play with the fire, and then she turns them all into food, and then the mom has to like break the spell, she does that by matching the food that they turned into to the thing that they wanted from the market, which is fun. But yeah, grisly scene where the witch is like actually digging into like the children as transformed food. So it's dark. It's got some nice illustrations here with this extraordinary creepy mushroom melting candle or something. So yeah, if you like a good Brothers Grimm fairy tale, there's a lot of other actual Brothers Grimm fairy tales, but this one's an extra one if you can't get enough, I guess. Not as fun as Rain Babies for me. Ending has Egg Pudding Boy just digging in. The rest of the family's like, yay, we're back together. We're not being eaten by the witch. We love you, Mom. Thanks for rescuing us. And he's just like, give me that damn egg pudding. So he was funny. Okay, The 10th Good Thing About Barney by Judith Viorst, illustrated by Eric Blegvad. These names today are hard for me. This is another very sad book, little tiny cute book, but very sad. It's about his cat dying. So the boy's cat dies, and it's got this is a case for me where it's a really simple premise, but in this case that doesn't feel basic and it doesn't feel boring because it's actually a pretty unique premise in spite of its simplicity. Like, I shouldn't even say in spite. Simplicity does not mean that it's boring. Simplicity can mean to the point in a really good way. I feel like things can either be to the point in a like we're glossing over the interesting details way, or it can be to the point in the like we've got something to say and we're going to say it with power and strength and interest and keep it to its core. There's like good and bad simplicity. This is good simplicity to me. There's like nice little details here and there about like kind of the realism of the world that just kind of makes it feel more like a story. Like his friend Annie comes over to the cat's funeral from next door, and like just adding the little detail of him having a friend next door and the little argument that he has with her about whether the cat goes to heaven, like it just makes it feel like I'm just being dropped into an actual, maybe this actually happened, kind of real world situation. So that's fun. The mom suggests that when he buries the cat, he thinks of 9 kind things to say about it, and 10 kind things to say about it, and he thinks of 9. He can't think of a 10th, and then by the end of the story, he learns from his dad, who's planting seeds in the garden, that the seeds will be able to grow better because of the compost that his cat will become. And so he ends up telling his mom that that's the 10th good thing about his cat, is that his cat will will help the plants grow, which is cool. It's just a little simple idea. They do that, that he like spends a little bit of a day learning what the 10th good thing is after the funeral, and then he learns what the 10th good thing is, he states it, and then the book ends. Nice and succinct, and a cute, unique message. A very nice, respectful, not wallowing, and not super schmaltzy, like serious, to the point, straightforward, like pleasantly succinct. I feel like that is a respectful tone to have for the potential of a kid reading this because their cat died. I feel like this respects the actual feelings of the moment. It doesn't try to be much else than that, and I think that in that moment where your cat has died and you're reading this book to maybe help you feel better, or somebody's giving you this book to help you feel better about it, it needs to be succinct in order to partially to be relatable, but partially to, like, I don't know, be respectful. Does that make sense? It's a respectful writing style. That's what I feel. I'm not going to explain myself further than that. Yeah, so it was nice. It's got some nice non-toxic masculinity in the father planting flowers and explaining death to his kids. So that's nice. On Bird Hill by Jane Yolen. Pictures by Bob Marstall. This one, the story is a little bit weird and flat, and there's not a lot there. It's not, if I read this to you aloud without showing the pictures, it basically is just like here's a land, and in the land there's a tree, and in the tree there's a bird, and the end. Like, that's essentially what the story feels like, but the pictures are really interesting. It's very heavily textured, but still comes across almost Seuss-like in how simplistic and round and curly everything kind of is. And then there's some completely unexplained surrealism later in the book. You can see through this egg to the kind of ghostly, creepy chick inside, and then when it breaks out, you can see a night sky with stars and moons in the egg. That's purely stylistic. The story has nothing to do with that. It doesn't speak to that. Then you have this adorable, weird drawing of the bird. It's kind of creepy and it's kind of cool. And there's like a house now in the nighttime that's inside the egg. Once again, completely unexplained, completely unaddressed. Then they look back out of the land, and that's it. So I liked this book, and it's this high up on this list just because of the art for me. I was compelled by the mysterious art. Okay, this one's called A Not Scary Story About Big Scary Things by C.K. Williams and Gabby, Swiatkowska or Sviatkovska. I'm not exactly sure. This book, I don't know, mixed bag for me a little bit, to be honest. I ended up putting it pretty high on my list because I respect a lot of things about it. One, I think that the art style is very interesting. The art style is switched up. I almost wondered for a moment before I remembered that there is only one illustrator listed, whether there was multiple illustrators, because the style changes so drastically mid-picture, as you can see here. This part and this part, very different art styles. And that just goes further and further. And that's sort of used in pages like this to express the sort of elusive nature of the beast in this story. So this story is about a monster that lives in this forest along with all these other normal animals, but the monster sort of is described inconsistently by different people. It's described, let's say, I really like the conversational art style. Sorry, not conversational art style. I really like the conversational writing style of this book too. There's this. Let's see. Once upon a time, there was a forest. It was your regular, ordinary, standard sort of forest. Had a big dark trees that blocked the sunlight. Had hills and mountains that you had to climb. Very conversational. In short, it was your usual scary, frightening, terrifying, mystifying forest. Except that this forest was a little different from other forests because along with all those other scary things, the bears and wolves and snakes and cliffs, it had one other thing. It had a monster. That's what people said anyway. People said there was a monster in that forest. I like that. Like, usually I get kind of weirded out when there's something like a sentence repeats what was just said, but that kind of works for me. That's what people said anyway. People said there was a monster in that forest. It just kind of reminds me of like that, kind of like, reminds me of like Abby Yo-Yo, Pete Seeger style, like just oral storytelling tradition, kind of like casual, like, let me sit you down and tell you a story kind of vibe, which I like. It was awful. They said it was big, about 10 feet, 6 inches tall, and it was scary. It was green for one thing, or blue, or maybe changed colors. It had long, sharp claws for another, and fangs. It's just like, it's inconsistent. It's an inconsistent description. We don't know what color it is. So it's all very abstract. The art style is kooky all over the place. Kind of reminds me of Henrik Drescher sometimes. Some nice, creepy, Bloodborne-esque characters here. And then there's a boy who's not afraid, and he walks through the forest and encounters the monster. This is my favorite picture of it. Cool. He encounters the monster, and he just goes on unafraid of it. And as this started to get here, the monster tries to scare him, and he just keeps on walking like he can't even hear it. I was thinking this was like a sort of an allegory for bullying, like, hey, if you just, don't give the bullies the attention that they want, they'll leave you alone eventually. I thought that's where this was going, and I was kind of like, okay with that message. And maybe that is kind of what it's going for, but then I kind of feel like if it's an allegory, it's probably for something a little bit more vague than bullying. The boy does start to respond to the monster, though, which kind of breaks the just ignore your bullies allegory, if that was her thing. The boy just starts to say, you're just not real. So maybe he's talking about fear in general, right? Like, just telling yourself that it's not real. So he's telling the monster, you're not real, you're not real, you're not real. And as he tells him that, the monster gets smaller and smaller. I don't like the message of telling kids to just tell the monsters that they're not real. Just mostly because I wasn't raised that way. My parents dealt with me being scared of monsters by saying, oh yeah, the monsters are real, but you can be friends with them. And I ended up really loving that approach because, as you can see, I love my monsters. And it kind of gave me this idea of, like, I don't have to be scared because, not because your feelings of fear aren't valid. That's what I feel like saying the monsters aren't real is telling kids. Like, if a kid is scared of a monster and you're like, the monster's not real, it's like telling the kid, you have nothing to be afraid of. Why are you afraid? You shouldn't be afraid. Your feelings of fear are not valid. It's non-validating. It's invalidating. And I don't like that. So for me, that's where this book kind of went off the rails for me, because I didn't love him just saying that the monster wasn't real at all, because I feel like it's better to validate a kid and be like, hey, like, I get it. I know that you're scared. I'm not going to tell you that that's a stupid fear. I am going to tell you, like, working within your worldview, working within your logic, within your frame of mind, I'm going to validate your feeling of fear for a monster, but I'm also going to give you an out for that fear, which is maybe we can make friends with the monster. Maybe we can think of the monster as something interesting, that kind of thing was the approach that was used on me as a kid, and it really worked. So yeah, didn't love this until they kind of save themselves at the last moment, because the boy finally says, like, all right, I suppose I could believe you in a little. I suppose I could believe in you a little, but no more than that. So he doesn't completely disbelieve the monster out of existence. He does believe the monster a little bit, and it becomes a cat that he takes home from the forest. So I don't know. It was all right, but it's kind of like up and down for me. I was like, where is this going? Good Trick Walking Stick by Sherry Mabry Bester and illustrated by Johnny Lambert. This one was actually recommended to me by my friend Annie, so thank you, Annie. I really liked it. It didn't have a story per se. I guess technically it does. It's sort of narratively written information book. It's not really a story per se. But it does have a bit of a narrative. Talks about the life cycle of a stick bug and all these facts about stick bugs, and taught me plenty of things that I didn't know about stick bugs. And I'm a bug nerd, so that's cool to learn new things about bugs. Really lovely pictures that I just really like the color and the texture, and I feel like it's like a good balance of like detail but not overdoing it. Just feels interesting. Feels compelling. The colors are really nice and refreshing on that white background. And yeah, it's mostly just information, little factoids about stick bugs with a little bit of narration. Talking about, like, along comes a hungry squirrel. Uh-oh, the stick insect sways in the breeze with the branches. The squirrel comes near. Its tail brushes the stick insect too close. Quick as a sneeze, the stick insect pulls in her legs and drops to the forest floor, just like a stick falling off a larger branch. And then it kind of talks about, like, what's going on here? Like, here's what that's its evasive maneuver, and here's what it does. Kind of provides factoids along with this basic narration. So, fun if you like learning about bugs. One thing that I like about this book is that it does not shy away from teaching pretty huge vocabulary to kids, which is something I really appreciate. This is obviously a kid's book, but it teaches terms like parthenogenesis and autotomy, and like includes the like species names of certain walking sticks, Temema christinae. Teaching those big terms and just like, hey, here it is, and we're just going to define it. We're not going to be like, it's a big word, and we're not going to put it in the like a special appendix in the back, and we're not going to like think, oh, that's too much for kids and leave it out. Include that stuff. Please, more books need to do that. I really appreciate that it did that. So yeah, good book for bug lovers. All right. These last three are the three that I liked more than the others. This one's called Stina by Lani Yamamoto. This one is I don't know, it's kind of a basic story, to be honest. It's got an interesting quality to it. It kind of takes this like very relatable idea of like being afraid to go outside in the winter because it's cold and you want to be cozy, and kind of turns it into like a whole almost somewhat fairy tale like structure where this girl, I guess, lives alone even though she's a child, and that's sort of unexplained, and she goes to extreme lengths, like somehow inventing and then procuring entire inventions to help assist her lifestyle of never going outside during the winter. So there's like fun moments like that that almost feel like world building and give this sort of almost like a Tove Jansson-esque kind of folktale, fairy tale feeling. And they've got here's all of her inventions for keeping warm. So it's pretty fun. Nice, like, stark, simplistic art style. And then she ends up, as you could probably predict, kind of, literally warming up to the idea of going outside and maybe not being a complete shut-in from the cold. But she does that through meeting these other kids who come in from the cold and, like, do sort of cultural exchange. Like, it's sort of, I feel like this is a book about cultural exchange, ultimately. Cultural exchange, not between real-world cultures necessarily, but between the stay warm inside culture and the have fun outside in the cold winter snow culture. And that's actually portrayed with real, like, lessons you can learn from this book. They have instructions for how to whistle with your fingers, which, to be honest, I tried and I couldn't do it, so maybe it's not as good as it wants to be, but maybe it works for some people. There's a recipe for hot cocoa that's in the back of the book. There's instructions on how to knit without needles. So it's fun. There's like there's like this actual cultural exchange between the characters that you actually kind of get to participate in yourself, all within this sort of like fantasy world that's crafted around real world relatable emotions about winter and coziness. So yeah, cool. Nice little small, very rough texture cover. Quaint little charming book. Speaking of charming, honestly, these Caldecott medals might be onto something, because my final two ones today are Caldecott Award winners. This one is Mr. Rabbit and the Lovely Present by Charlotte Zolotow. Oh, wasn't there another book by her in here? Which one was that? Man, I don't remember. Pictures by Maurice Sendak. So obviously that's the reason I got this. I'm a huge Maurice Sendak fan. The pictures are, as you would expect, very full of life and charm. The poses that the illustrations are really just these characters standing around while they have the conversation, but they're just full of so much life and character. I really get the sense that they're really walking around. These poses all feel very natural, and there's a lot of variety to them. So I thought that was awesome. The illustrations are great. The storytelling has a very like recursive, cyclical, oral storytelling tradition type of story about a girl asking this rabbit what she should get for her mom. And there's a nice the cyclical storytelling builds on itself. She asks for 3 different present ideas, and each time they're kind of based on a different color that her mom likes. And they go through this kind of like back and forth that's kind of the same back and forth every time, like how about this, how about this, how about this, and then the same responses back from the girl, and like every single time they talk about a bird that is that color, and then for the first few, the girl, I'll just read you this because it's a good example of the kind of way that the recursive storytelling builds upon itself to create humor and personality. So they're talking about red, and after talking about a bunch of other things, the rabbit says, there are red birds, red cardinals. And the girl says, no, she likes birds and trees. And so then once they move on to talking about yellow, they think of a bunch of yellow things, and then Mr. Rabbit says, a canary bird is yellow, said Mr. Rabbit. She likes birds and trees, the little girl said. That's right, you told me, said Mr. Rabbit. And so then they continue. And then after green, when they're talking about green, they talk about a bunch of things, and then the rabbit says, parrots are green, said Mr. Rabbit, but she likes birds and trees. So he's remembered this time, and I like the way that it builds upon itself, and it kind of like makes this, it's humorous. It doesn't make me laugh out loud, but it's humorous to me. So fun writing, cute little book, very charming, very, very simple. This one, David Weisner's Flotsam. I've read a book by David Weisner before. Can't remember what it's called. Art something? Maybe I'll put it on the screen. I loved that book. I I love this book maybe even more. And this book I feel is very notable that I like it because it doesn't have any words. And usually I shy away from books that do not have words. I like to get some writing there. I'm very interested in how people write for children. But this one's got no words, and it really, really works. Starts out with this sort of like zooming out motif where it starts really close up on this little crab, and then the boy's looking at it with the magnifying glass. And then he finds this camera in the ocean, and it's very 90s. He just rushes to go get it developed at the store and gets this instant development. And then the rest of the book is mostly just the photos from this camera, and they paint a very mysterious picture. There's it's all these things that are just slightly fantastical. This mechanical fish in among the other fish, this living room underwater full of ocean creatures, and it's really just, it's so great that it doesn't have words, because it it's like a great example of like why you should have no words in a book, or like what type of book should have no words is like a one that really benefits from not having words. This one benefits specifically from not having words because it makes you just need to, you're so curious, but there's nothing to explain what's going on, so you really end up spending time looking through the details of these pictures and trying to piece together what's going on and tell yourself a story. And there's so much to tell yourself because there's so much going on in these pictures and so many of them, and it creates this real satisfying sense of exploration and mystery that I love, and that would actually have been spoiled if there was text explaining any of it. And then it just gets even more magical. After all the other photos, he finds these photos of other children holding photos, and the child in this photo is holding a photo of another child. Okay, he doesn't find a bunch of photos. I should clarify. He just finds this one photo. The last photo in the camera is this girl holding another photo. And that photo is of a kid holding another photo. So he uses his magnifying glass to look even closer and finds that the photos go further and further. And then he uses his microscope that he brought to the beach to go further and further until he finds a picture of just a boy not holding a photo. From a very long time ago, it seems. How mysterious. What's going on? I love it. I love the atmosphere and mystery of that. And then, he's emptied the camera of photos, but he decides to take a photo of himself with the other photo of all the kids with the photos, and then sends it back in the ocean to be filled with more photos along with his, so that the exact same story can happen again to some other kid. Maybe you. Right? So I thought that was great. That's the kind of book that, like, they could have made that into like a pretty fun movie, but I don't know. Maybe they will someday. I feel like that could be a really good movie, like a la Jumanji or something. There could be a lot of you could really flesh out this idea with a lot of cool backstory if you wanted to. In fact, you could make lots of different movies, very different movies, that all were technically adaptations of this book because there's so much potential and mystery in it. And, so it's a thinker, it makes you think about, it makes stories come up in your head more than just one. It manages to tell as many stories as you wanted to, ultimately. So I thought that was really cool. Great argument for books without words. So well done, David Weisner. Taught me a lesson. All right, well, that's all I got. 45 minutes. Not as short as I would have liked, but it'll do. Okay, I got to go to the library, so talk to you later. Bye.